This is Al-Aqsa Mosque. The Jerusalem landmark is known as Al-Haram al-Sharif, or the Noble Sanctuary by Muslims, and as the Temple Mount by Jews. Spanning 35 acres, it's situated in the Old City, and it's significant to all three Abrahamic religions. But it's also one of the world's most contested territories. Following the Declaration of Israel in 1948, which uprooted and expelled 750,000 Palestinians, East Jerusalem, including the Old City and Al-Aqsa Mosque, came under Jordanian control. But after the 1967 war, Israel occupied East Jerusalem in violation of international law. And since then, Al-Aqsa Mosque has become a flashpoint and a symbol of Palestinian resistance. Now, over the years, Jordan's authority over the site has weakened, while Israeli incursions and restrictions have increased and become more violent. Today, as the Israeli war on Gaza rages, Al-Aqsa sees near daily settler incursions, raids, and attacks on Palestinian worshippers. Many Palestinians fear the slow, deliberate erosion of their presence and worry that losing access to Al-Aqsa could be a precursor to losing their land altogether. So what is the history of Al-Aqsa, and how has the status quo changed? The idea of a status quo in Jerusalem goes back to an 1852 Ottoman edict that froze control over Christian holy sites, particularly the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, between various religious communities, and forbid any construction or alterations to their existing status. Reaffirmed by later treaties, it created rigid rules about who could do what, down to fixing doors or lighting candles. And over time, this status quo became a model for managing other religious sites in Jerusalem, including Al-Aqsa Mosque in 1967. Now, after the first Arab-Israeli war broke out in 1948, Israel captured 78% of historic Palestine. East Jerusalem, where Al-Aqsa Mosque is situated, fell under the custodianship of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. But Israel's encroachment intensified in 1967, and after the Six-Day War, Israel illegally annexed the Old City and Al-Aqsa, violating international law. Following the war, Jordan and Israel agreed that the Waqf Islamic Trust would control affairs inside the mosque, while Israel controlled external security and overall sovereignty. This status quo stipulated that only Muslim worshippers were permitted to visit the site, whilst non-Muslims were allowed with permission from the Islamic Waqf during set hours, but were not permitted to pray there. On the southwestern fringe of Al-Aqsa Mosque lies the Western Wall, also known to Jews as the Wailing Wall. For Jews, the wall is believed to be the last remaining remnant of the Second Jewish Temple, destroyed by the Romans in 70 CE, and is considered the holiest site where Jews can pray. It's administered by Israel's Ministry of Religious Services and the Western Wall Heritage Foundation, and operates under Orthodox Jewish rules, which includes gender segregation during prayer. While non-Jewish visitors are allowed to enter the area, they are not permitted to perform any non-Jewish religious rituals in line with the status quo arrangements governing the site. But an extremist messianic Jewish movement known as the Temple Mount movement, a belief that a third temple must be built in the compound, destroying Al-Aqsa Mosque, has undermined the status quo. Extremist settler groups believe that the third temple will fulfill a biblical prophecy and restore Jewish sovereignty over the site. Some of these groups are now openly rehearsing rituals linked to temple construction. In 2024, members of the Temple Institute staged a symbolic practice of the red heifer sacrifice, a ritual believed by some to be necessary for building a third temple on the very site where Al-Aqsa and the Dome of the Rock now stand. Despite the agreement between Jordan and Israel, settler groups raid the mosque without Palestinian permission and carry out excavations in the area. In 1990, right-wing Jewish settler group known as the Temple Mount Faithful attempted to lay a cornerstone, the symbolic first stone of construction for the third temple in the compound. For many Palestinians and Muslims, the provocative act was seen as a direct threat to the mosque's existence and an attempt to replace it. This triggered a protest in which Israeli forces killed 21 Palestinians. On September 28, 2000, Israeli opposition leader Ariel Sharon visited Al-Haram al-Sharif, or Temple Mount, surrounded by Israeli guards and police, sparking off clashes which would result in the Second Intifada. Once considered to be on the fringes of Israeli society, the Temple movement has grown rapidly and has become increasingly mainstream. When Sharon became prime minister a year later as the head of the Likud party, his government oversaw the construction of a vast separation wall, effectively cutting off Palestinian access to East Jerusalem and Al-Aqsa from much of the occupied West Bank. What was once a place of regular pilgrimage for Muslims from across Palestine became increasingly inaccessible, with entry limited by age, permits, and humiliating checkpoint procedures. In recent years, settler incursions into the compound, often under armed police protection, have increased dramatically. Organised tours by Jewish groups now occur almost daily, facilitated by Israeli authorities. Far-right Israeli politicians now make high-profile visits. In January 2023, far-right National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, a settler advocate, visited the site. In 2024, he went further, publicly calling for the construction of a Jewish synagogue at the Al-Aqsa Mosque.
צריך גם להגיד ביושר, יש התקדמות מאוד מאוד גדולה כאן במשילות, בריבונות, תמונות של יהודים שמתפללים, כמו שאמרתי, המדיניות שלנו היא לאפשר תפילה.
At the same time, radical Temple Mount activists have accelerated preparations for the construction of a third temple, a goal that would require the removal of the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Part of this vision is the ritual of the red heifer, a rare purification ceremony outlined in Jewish scripture which calls for the sacrifice of a flawless red heifer on Jerusalem's Mount of Olives to pave way for the construction of the third temple. In 2022, 5 Texan red heifers were flown to Israel, and in 2024, an ultra-nationalist group were pictured practicing the ritual with a cutout of a red heifer. At Al-Aqsa, tensions tend to escalate during Ramadan, when Israeli authorities place restrictions on Palestinian worshippers who want to pray at the site. In 2021, 2022, and 2023, Israeli police raided the mosque compound during prayers, firing tear gas, stun grenades, and rubber bullets. Worshippers, including women and children, were forcibly cleared from the mosque. Compounding tensions turn into nationalist events like the Jerusalem Flag March. This is an annual state-sponsored Israeli celebration of the 1967 occupation of East Jerusalem. The march draws thousands of Israelis, including far-right ministers, and winds through the heavily populated Muslim quarter. While it doesn't formally include the Al-Aqsa compound, the event is often preceded by a campaign of violence in the Old City that shuts down Palestinian majority areas, with participants frequently chanting slogans like "Death to Arabs," "Gaza is ours," and "May their villages burn." Young Israeli men have been seen harassing Palestinian residents, spitting at women in hijabs, ransacking shops, and even forcing their way into homes. Judicial decisions have also played a role in shifting the status quo. In recent years, Israeli courts have issued rulings legitimizing silent Jewish prayer in the Al-Aqsa Mosque, a practice once considered a clear violation of long-standing agreements. At the same time, Jordan's authority, represented by the Islamic Waqf, has repeatedly been undermined. Waqf officials have been blocked from enforcing regulations inside the compound, and in 2023, even the Jordanian ambassador was denied entry. This was widely condemned as a direct defiance of Jordan's custodianship. Increasingly, Israeli police have bypassed or overridden Waqf directives, asserting de facto control over internal affairs at the site. Now, Jordan continues to issue strong statements condemning Israeli incursions and violations. Its Ministry of Foreign Affairs has called settler invasions provocative and unacceptable, warning that these violations could lead to uncontrollable escalation. Jordan maintains that the Al-Aqsa Mosque is an exclusive Muslim place of worship, and that the Jerusalem Waqf is the sole legitimate authority. But more and more, these declarations are viewed as symbolic. Israel's actions, like denying access to Jordanian diplomats or ignoring Waqf oversight, expose the limits of Jordanian influence. Without enforcement power or international backing, Jordan's custodianship appears more ceremonial than practical. For many Palestinians, what's happening at Al-Aqsa mirrors the trajectory of the Ibrahimi Mosque in Hebron. After a Jewish settler killed 29 Muslim worshippers there in 1994, Israeli authorities split the mosque between Jewish and Muslim worshippers, eventually giving 60% of the site to settlers. Over time, Palestinians in Hebron have faced increasing isolation, movement restriction, and settler violence. In 2025, Israel transferred administrative control over parts of the Ibrahimi Mosque compound from the Palestinian-run municipality to the religious council of the local Israeli settlement, a further erosion of Palestinian sovereignty. Now, Palestinians see similar patterns emerging at Al-Aqsa through settler incursions, reduced access, court rulings, police raids, and the steady erosion of Waqf authority. Today, whilst Israel's war on Gaza intensifies, killing over 62,000 Palestinians, Al-Aqsa remains a site of near-daily confrontations. Jordan, once a central actor in maintaining Al-Aqsa's status quo, now finds its custodianship reduced to a largely symbolic role, issuing condemnations, but unable to enforce red lines. The shift in power on the ground reflects not just Jordan's diminished influence in Al-Aqsa, but how far the status quo itself has unraveled.